Okay, we are about to begin today's session. I just want to give people a notice once again. We will be recording this session. Um, and if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat and I will get to them at the end of the session. Thank you. Okay, so today we're going to be discussing custom dashboards and reporting for DxO synthetics. While the things I'm showing you today are really a general introduction to dashboards in DxO2, we will be focusing specifically on the metrics that come out of synthetics. So all the examples will be for synthetics, but this knowledge could be applied elsewhere in DxO2 dashboarding. Since we are showing you an early access to some of the things in DxO2, we do have to have this disclaimer. Though the capabilities in dashboarding that you will be seeing today are generally available for all customers, there are a few exceptions where they might be trailing behind in one or two of the capabilities as we are upgrading portions in some of our larger tenants. And I'll explain that a little bit when we get to those portions. But when DxO2 Synthetics is released, that all of these capabilities will be available for all DxO2 customers. So in our agenda today, we're going to talk about what is dashboarding in DxO2, give you a quick introduction to the capabilities. We'll go through the layout and structure of a dashboard so that we have a common terminology base as we go through how do you create dashboards, how do you edit dashboards. We'll talk about the different metric query types. There are actually many other types of queries because our dashboarding is very flexible. We've got plugins which allow us to access our metadata, plugins that allow you to access, for example, instance data for end user monitoring or transaction traces, things like that. But we're specifically covering metric queries today. We'll do a quick live. Let's create our first dashboard and go through editing a dashboard. And then we'll spend a minute or so or two on creating a scheduled report based on a dashboard. And then we'll answer questions. So really the first place to start is giving you a quick introduction to dashboarding in DxO2, which is very different than the capabilities you had in ASM. Dashboarding in DxO2 is really flexible and and it's really built into the platform as a native capability. Now, DxO2 has a lot of things in it. You may use some of it, you may use none of it other than dashboarding and synthetics, but it really is a platform that brings a lot of capabilities to you, and you can choose the pieces that you want to use. And in this case, we're doing synthetics and we're doing dashboarding. Uh, the last training session, we went over alerting, and prior to that, we went over service analytics a little bit as part of security. So there's quite a bit here, but don't be overwhelmed. You can focus specifically on just the area that is involved with what you need to get done. So to focus in a little more on dashboards, let's talk about some of the things about it. Well, first of all, it has enterprise level security, and I'll say this a lot because it is Grafana based, but it is a fork of Grafana where we've added a lot of functionality on top of standard Grafana, including our enterprise level security, which is baked right in. It's not. It's actually not. A kind of a plugin on top. We've actually modified the Grafana base to make it what I would like to call it very secure and enterprise level in that SAML group, SAML. We've retrofitted our enterprise security filters on top and various other things. Um, it does have hundreds of built-in dashboards for everything from seeing what's going on in your mainframe, if you're feeding mainframe data into the system, to end user overviews, to what's going on in my containerized Kubernetes environment or my OpenShift environment or what's going on in my WebSphere system. So hundreds of built-in dashboards are available for you. Now, what we're covering today is creating new dashboards, but you could easily make a copy of a dashboard and modify it with the skills you will learn today if you wanted to customize it, maybe add your logo, things like that. Dashboards can have drill downs in context. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we won't. It's more of an advanced topic, so we won't get too deep into it. But we may have some advanced dashboarding classes in the future. We're just assessing the demand. I mentioned the compliance of the SAML security, but one of the things that dashboarding inside DXO2 can provide is bringing together subsets of monitoring data and controlling that access and scoping it down and grouping it to make it easy to find and locate, where you could lens over and set filters based upon something as simple as your universe setting in DXO2, and you could have a universe per application, for example. We also have multiple query expression languages. We've got our NASQL, which we'll cover today, as well as our advanced analytics or WaveQL and PromQL support, which we will also cover today. And we do have the scheduler, which we said we would cover at the end, for taking a dashboard and creating a PDF of it and having it automatically emailed on a periodic basis. So the first place to start is really the structure and layout of dashboards so that we talk about things, we say the same names. There's some terminology here that is very specific to, I guess you could say Grafana if you've never used Grafana. So let's just, set a baseline. So the first thing though is, where is dashboards? And very easy to find in DXO2 on the left menu. You click on and open up the dashboards folder, and then you're provided a bunch of options. And let me explain what they are here. Some of the key ones, and I'll go over some of the ones that are not super critical for what you're doing. So first of all, the all dashboards provides a list that you can then filter down of dashboards. You can also have dashboards organized by folders, and you could view an individual folder to kind of organize things. You can also have tags attached to dashboards, which provide another filtering mechanism. Because when you do have hundreds or thousands of dashboards, you need an easy way to focus down and find what you're looking for. Now, you can restrict access to certain dashboards if you're an administrator and who can see what data, but this is really more of a generic, how do I filter down and find what I'm looking for? Dashboards, I should mention, can also have links directly to them, so you may just have a bookmark. Snapshots are a dashboard which can be created based on an existing dashboard where it just literally snapshots the data maybe every hour. You can create yourself a link, and someone can go in and have a bookmark to that, and they don't even have to log in and see everything. Explore is a way to, very much like the name, test out queries, but explore your data. Generally, as you're learning to do more advanced things in the query languages, you might use Explore to ad hoc look for things. This used to be much more of an important function inside DXO2 for dashboarding, but we've actually introduced some new capabilities that you might have seen show up in the last update. I'm not going to go through them today, but also provides under triage the ability to analyze your data. It's very much like Explore with a lot more visualization capabilities. Discover is something we're not going to cover here because Discover primarily is for document-based data, not time series data like metrics. Discover, for example, is if you're doing end user monitoring with our browser agent or mobile SDK, and you want to go in and search for through the raw data looking for specific values of a field or an attribute or a time range. You can sort of get an ad hoc report using Discover. It is something that is 100% our code. It is not available in Grafana, but customers love it when they run into the situation where they need to go find something in, for example, our Elastic data store used for raw data for end user. Um, Very soon, I should mention, you'll be able to do that complete searching for traces. Today, you can search the metadata. You'll be able to actually search inside traces very soon. Reports, I mentioned what they are. It's going out and creating a PDF on a scheduled basis, and we'll cover that at the end. Data sources is something that generally, as a user, you won't go into, but it is where we can create named name name data set sources for creating dashboards. For example, maybe I want to look inside a specific table in our database and I want to give it a name to make it easier to find so you don't have to search through all the names when you're building dashboards or in Explore or Discover. So when we actually open a dashboard, I'm going to go through the sections here. I know it's a little overwhelming, but I want to give some examples here. So we're going to start at the top. In the upper right-hand corner, you will see the universe filter. And the universe filter, just as we've shown with all the other screens in synthetics, controls the data set that is available for the current screen. You will be granted universes based on who you are. Now, I'm logged into the system when we do our demonstrations as sort of a deity user who has access to everything. So I will see all the universes, and there's quite a few in the tenant I'm going to be using. But you may only have one or two or a handful which are assigned to you, and that is how you can very quickly change the data set that a specific dashboard is working on. It also means if you open up a dashboard and you don't see data, maybe your universe is set to a data set, a filtered data set that doesn't have data that's applicable for that dashboard. You may need to just change your universe. Maybe it's because it's for a different application. You're looking at WebSphere data, and your universe doesn't have any WebSphere data, and you have to switch to a different universe that has WebSphere data for that app. Moving down one line, you'll see also just below that is the time selection. You have relative time and absolute time. So 24 hours, or give me last Tuesday, last Thursday, give me the last 90 days. So you pick your time range here, and it is consistently kept through your selection of dashboards, unless when you're saving your dashboard, there is a checkbox that says save the current time range, which then you can have a dashboard that's always called health status last 24 hours, and it will always switch the time range to 24 hours. Additionally, um, every panel or area uh, on your dashboard, whether it's a graph or a chart or a table, can have relative time to the main time range, or you can even put absolute time in as well. Generally, relative time. Maybe you have a dashboard where it's the last 24 hours and you have a specific widget or a specific panel that shows the last hour of whatever time range you chose. Okay. The next piece over would be up on the left-hand side, which is your description of what you're viewing. So it'll be a folder name if you have a folder, which the dashboard is within, and it will be the name of the dashboard you're either editing or viewing. This is useful because they are also quick links. So if I click on, for example, this APM metric view, I click on that link, and it will actually take me to the rest of the folder, and I can choose another dashboard in that folder. If I haven't saved the dashboard I'm editing, then I will have a problem where it'll warn me and say, you haven't saved this. Do you want to save? So you can go out and save it, or you can lose your changes by changing dashboards. I would try and avoid using the forward and backwards buttons on the browser. They do work, but sometimes they can actually, if you're a little too click happy, lose context. On the same line, um, excuse me, in the line below are what we call query variables. These are things that you, as a dashboard creator, would create in the configuration and provide queries to populate the lists. They can be static values, they can come out of a query, they can be open text fields, and we'll go through a little bit of that in our creating of a dashboard. And next to it are dashboard links. So we can, by tag, say include links for any dashboard that has these tags. So for example, if I've got a dashboard set that I want to have uh, be synthetics, I can add a tag synthetics to it, and then I can say show all the links to synthetics dashboards on my uh, on my dashboard, and it will obviously exclude itself. You can view it as links that are spread out here, or you can actually just have it be a drop down. It's your choice. Uh, Below that is really where the guts of a dashboard is. We have these panels, and that's what we call the widgets that you place. They can be dragged around, resized. They auto layout on a grid basis. There are various types, which I'll go over when we do the actual dashboarding, but there are things like tables and pie charts and donut pie charts and bar charts and even static SVG images. So if you have a logo you want to place on the screen, you can convert that logo to an SVG and paste the SVG into a panel, and that is a static panel. You can also choose to have panels have a background or be transparent, so they either blend into the actual screen itself, the dashboard, or if they have a very distinct delineation. You have controls over legends and other things as well, which we'll get into. When you actually look at a panel, if you have a little, I'll call it a little, I guess it's almost like an upside down caret here, a little drop down. There are panel controls. You may not have panel controls if you don't have access to edit the dashboard, or if a dashboard is marked as read only. You can mark a dashboard as read only as the administrator. That kind of protects the dashboard. It's in the dashboard settings. And then in order to edit a dashboard, you have to unmark it read only, and then you can edit it and you may switch it back. Out of the box dashboards are generally marked as read only, and they may even be protected where only Broadcom can actually take off that flag. Um, but you can go in and make a copy of it and then edit it yourself. The copy is able to be edited. So also on a panel, you will have some sort of legend. Generally by default, if it's not a table, you can turn that legend off. You can control what the legend is, and that's part of the query and what's returned. I did mention the universe filter, the time range, but there's a little button here called Add Panel, just underneath the universe filter. And that is where we will add an additional graph or table or widget panel to a dashboard. We can drag it around, resize it, and rearrange it, and then save the dashboard once we put our query in. You'll also notice a little PDF button, so you can generate a PDF on demand as well. So let's take a quick look at a dashboard just to kind of run through it live before we jump into actually creating queries and things. But I just want you to be familiar because you're looking at pictures, but sometimes it's a little nicer just to look at an actual dashboard. So here I've got all dashboards. I've got quite a few dashboards, and these are folders themselves. So if I go to this, it's a folder. You can see there's quite a bit about out of the box. But here I'm actually going to look for the training folder. So in the training folder, we've got, I can go and focus down on this folder directly. We've got two dashboards. We have our metric query and our query with variables. So let me quickly bring this up for you. So here is a dashboard, very straightforward. It is not marked read only, so I can move things around. I can resize by grabbing the edge. I can change the data set. Let me pick a data set that has no data. Now this should be, SiteMinder should provide me no data for this. So I've got no data. This one's still refreshing because it has to query everything out. We'll talk about that in a minute, but you saw actually, whoops, maybe I should go back to that. Yeah, let's just pick NetOps or something. It should have a different data set. Actually, that might be open. Yeah, there we go. No data in SiteMinder. Oh, what do? I pick a universe that has data. Very straightforward. Here's where I can generate a PDF. I can add a panel, add an empty panel. We'll go through that in a little bit. Can close that. Very straightforward. Here's where I have my ability to edit my dashboard settings, and we'll go through that as well. If I don't have that option, it's probably because I don't have rights or it's marked read only. If we want to mark a dashboard as favorite, we can click here and it'll just show up in a set of the special favorites folder. It's easy to get to. I can change that time range, absolute times, relative times, change my time zone, refresh, can zoom into a time range or tighten it down pretty easily. And we can also auto refresh. So if I want to have it, sitting up there and refreshing every 5 minutes, it can. Very straightforward. Let's hop back out, see how these are hyperlinks. I'll go here. Oh, I should mention you can share a dashboard that provides a persistent link. And if I want to make a copy of saved dashboard, click back there and I'm back into my folder. If I want to go back to the main list, I just I go over here, pop it up and click manage. Here's my training dashboards again. Here's one with variables. You'll notice I can change some variables. Actually, let's change these. And some of the dashboards reflect different items. Where each individual query is modified, you don't have to have a pull down effect all of them. And we'll go through that as well. Okay, one or two more things. You may have noticed this idea of playlists. Playlists are the ability to create a carousel of dashboards. So you mentioned in the setup for there, you say which dashboards, and then of those dashboards, how frequently should it rotate between them. It's very useful if you have kind of dashboards sitting on kind of a big screen in a knock or something. You may also notice very slightly here, I have an SVG image of the Broadcom logo. I used it as a splitter here just to make it a little delineation, also to show the ability to do that as well. Okay, let's hop back to the presentation and start talking about queries, because that's kind of the big stuff here. So let's go through the query types and how do we create variables. But the first thing you need to understand is, how do you identify a metric? How do you identify something that you'd want to graph? Um, very easy. It's a really easy way. If you go to metric traces by agent, you can locate that. I covered a lot of that in the user training, where you can go in and you can find the metrics for a specific monitor. In this case, I'm using ASM data being piped in over direct ingestion. For this example, I'm actually not using our main dev environment as I have for the previous trainings. I'm using an actual production environment here where we've got ASM piping in data. Um, and what I've got here, first of all, is what we call the source name specifier. Uh, Also, we generally refer to it as, the agent path. But source name specifier is really the key thing to remember uh, for metric queries. The metric name is the actual name of a metric, not its context. The metric path, which are the folder branches here, that is the metric context or metric path. And so in this case, I can see it's tenant one API is the name of the folder, and the name of the monitor is API v3 statistic. And then underneath that would be a whole bunch of metrics. Now, if I wanted uptime and I wanted to use what we call or discuss it as the full metric path, it is the metric path plus the metric name is the full metric path. Okay, and that is used in the queries as well. Um, and it's just really good to get that concept, and we'll go through that very quickly when we do the live demonstration. Though I have showed that before for some of the other alarm training and things. Now, you'll also need to know metric attributes. So if I wanted to find out an attribute of a metric, I can look it up in inventory, which can take a little longer than finding it through the context of the metric tree here. Now, understand, I may have a bunch of ASM location path Los Angeles that could apply to a lot of monitors. And so, in many cases, you want to look through and get, when you're trying to identify a unique metric, multiple attributes to describe it. Okay. Oh, if I wasn't clear, you'll see on the when you're in the metric traces by agent, there's a little bit of something here that you can click on, and it says attributes on it. And once you do that, this pops out. So there are two basic metric type queries in DxO2, and they function very differently. There is our AIOps metric query, which is based on NASQL using the full metric path, usually a regex. Doesn't have to be, can be exact, but it's usually a regex, which is built out of the source name specifier and the attribute name specifier, which is the full metric path. So it's the metric path colon the metric name. This is for people who've used APM Classic or DX APM or even existing DxO2 should be very familiar to you, um, as this is the basis for the alerting in DxO2. You should also understand, because you're using regex, you have to be careful not to be overly open in your scope. There's a metric preview ability in the metric browser where you can use a search and enter your regex to see what it matches, or you can use that explore piece in DX dashboards to make sure your query isn't too open. It's constrained the way you want to be. There is a restriction of a certain number of metrics returned and your interval. So if your interval is set to auto, it will dynamically change the interval of the query to keep or try to keep the return set below the threshold limit of 10,000 records. But if you, for example, go in and you get an error over 10,000, I think it's nodes returned, you can simply go double check your interval, and or reduce your time frame, but easier to check your interval and just set that to auto. You may not be able to get 1 minute data for the past, I don't know, 90 days with that result. You might be able to have it 5 minutes. I don't know the math right now off the top of my head, but that is something key to understand. Uh, the AIOps advanced query is a different type of query. Its result sets are limited by the number of data points returned in the result sets, not the number of metrics. I know that sounds similar. It'll become a little more obvious in that and how that works as we go through some result sets. One thing I didn't mention about AIOps metric query, to do math, like sums and things like that, there's some built-in aggregations, but to do real math, you have to use the transformation tab in the dashboard panel, and I'll show that how that works. It's point and click, but requires a little bit of trial and error if you want to get something very specific formatted the way you want, where I might sum it and then I have to go back and change transform the number of digits or drop off, maybe the decimal point or something. Whereas the advanced queries, which are based on what we call wavefront QL or WaveQL or PromQL, can actually do programmatic calculations as part of the query. So you can actually send over to the engine, sum it up, or give me the top, and that return set is what's restricted on the number of data points. So it's not the number of data points that are being processed, then returned back, and then summed up. The summing is being done in the back end, and that's the difference. Okay. However, there's certain things where it might be easier to do a metric query, and other things where it might be easier to do an advanced query, and we'll try to show some examples of that. I actually think I do have an example for where AIOps advanced query actually isn't appropriate for something related to a variable. So, and don't worry, we're going to go into this live in a minute or two, or a few minutes. But dashboard query types for the metric query, you can have one or more queries. They're called A and B and C, and they're very easy to add. I'll show you that later. But you have a place to enter your source name specifier. You have to choose, is it an exact? Is it a regex? Is it a contains? You choose your criteria. If you do put a regex in, you need to escape any characters. We use the pipe symbol in the metric pass in the source name specifier in order to delineate the different tokens of the metric path. The attribute name specifier, which is that full metric path. In this case, I've got a regex for anything underneath the mobile to mainframe monitor, and probes failed is the metric I'm looking for. You have options for aggregation, where if you enable aggregation, you can choose to aggregate by the metric name, by the attribute name specifier, by the source name specifier, by a specific token inside the metric path. So maybe you choose to want to do it by the monitor name. You can actually choose which token is available to be used for the aggregation. So where's it doing that group by? You can limit it to 10. So for example, the top 10 results. Notice I've got my order by top, bottom 10 results, because you may wind up having a large set. So that is useful if I want to do top end or bottom end, that kind of a thing. When you enter these, this is your effective at the bottom, the full metric path. It will provide me a link down to superdomain, synthetics, ASM monitoring, any folder for the mobile to mainframe monitor, probes failed. When we say any folder, I'm using the term not in the ASM sense, but in the metric tree sense, or the investigator sense. There are no folders in DX02 synthetics. If we are doing things where we do need to create that sum, once again, the data set's returned and then we transform the return data set. There's quite a few options. You can rearrange or rename data points. You can exclude or do different types of math. Very easy. If we go over and click on transform and we go down to, for example, add a field from a calculation, we can remove the fields that we're calculating on. We want a total, which is a sum. And we can even change the name of the returned legend here as well. So we're calculating that total, and very simple. Now, if you don't have a regex, you, for example, do a total, and you're doing it in a graph, it's going to be equivalent to the same because it's one metric. You're basically summing on itself. If, however, I have this as as for example a gauge or something like that, if you don't put total, it's the current value. If you put a total, it could be the total value added up of all the values that are returned for that time range. In an advanced query, a little bit simpler, a little bit easier. We can tell it how many data points we want to return. Is there a minimum interval? Because it will, and you'll notice this is grayed out. It will change that interval to match the data points that you say. So if I choose 10,000 data points, it's going to say the minimum interval is 30 seconds here because that's kind of the example. You can enter a physical one and say I only want 5-minute data, and it'll give you up to 5-minute data up to 1,507 data points. When I choose the query, and I didn't mention it here, but I'm going to show you. There's a drop down here in the queries. Don't worry, we will go through this live. Where you can then pull down. If you open these query options, we get the time range. You can enter a time shift. These are grayed out, so they're not entered, but that's an example. And if I put a relative time shift of 1 hour, it's pretty straightforward. It's offset by an hour. Time shift is, current time shift. So here's my example of WaveQL PromQL. So I'm doing a time series, and we'll talk about this in a second structurally. My ASM folder path attribute, that's why we looked at the attribute earlier, is mobile to mainframe, and my metric underscore name, which is another attribute, is probes failed. And I want to sum it up. So it's taking all the values and it's summing it up in the back end. And then I get my data set returned. So it's very useful when you're dealing with large quantities of data because it's all done in the back end and you're not transforming it on the visualization side. If I wanted to add additional query, notice I said A, add another query B. That's if I want to have multiple series on the same graph, for example. So what's the structure of that advanced query? So I mentioned you have the attributes, right? You have a set of attributes for it to essentially tell the backend to find the metrics with these attributes. We've got a logical operator, so we can say this and this or this, and you can even use the ASM folder path not equal to, so not a bang symbol equal to mobile to mainframe. All of those kind of things work. There is an order to the operation set by parentheses. So you can use parentheses if you want to have, ASM folder path mobile to mainframe and metric path equals probe failed, or ASM folder path equals my synthetic and metric name equals probes failed. So you can create complex order of operations for matching metrics. And then you can add additional mathematical operators on top, sum, top, that kind of a thing, percentiles and, and things like that. But these are the common things that you can do with the metrics. And once again, all of this is calculated on the back end, so the data set returned is limited to those number of data points, which makes it highly efficient. So the AOPS advanced query, one of the things you also have to notice, there's something called keep, and it's very important that you add these because there are instances where some of the implied keeps aren't carried over. And when I say implied keep, generally if you create a time series return, it's going to return a date time. Wonderful. But if I sum it up, the sum may not include the individual date times. So I'm forcing it to say always keep the date and time, always keep the data value of the result of that expression, the sum. And by adding a text-based return or attribute, in this case, the metric name, that will be used as the legend. So if I want to add another attribute, maybe have it concatenated, maybe source name specifier or something else, ASM location, you click add a column and you add another text one and it'll append them in the order it sees here. Okay, very straightforward. This is a custom attribute metric name and it's very easy, and we'll talk more about that when we do live. So using those techniques, you can get the same results with two different query types. You will notice the legend is different. That's because legends function a little differently. It's the name of the query in DX02 NAS metric query. So the basic query is the total because we're doing a transformation uh, of a total. So the transformation takes over the legend. Where in the advanced query, that's actually the expression I used here, which is the metric name. So we get the metric names for all of the aggregated metrics. So creating a dropdown for variables, pretty straightforward. We have the dropdown I showed you earlier. You go into the gear icon to edit the main dashboard. You go down to variables, and we can add a variable. If there's one there or multiple, you get a list of them. You can just click on it to choose it. And then we choose the name for the variable. That's how we reference it um, in the queries that we want to make applicable. You give it a query. You choose if is it going to be an advanced query, a basic query. Is it going to be under type here, we could choose free text. We could choose static values. We give it our expression. When should it refresh the list on every time I change the time range, run that query again, or when I load the dashboard. It's just an efficiency. What metric to keep? I only really need to keep a text attribute because that's what's going to be used in the dropdown. Um, and you get some other, we can operate and do some replacements on the values using regex. You can change a sorting. You can have an option for all, which you choose and create, and it wildcards things out. Sometimes that's useful, sometimes it's not. Um, and preview of values is a preview of what those values would be if you ran it with your current time range. Simple as that. In order to use this metric, in our query, we replace any static value with a $sign, curly bracket, the name from up here, name. Label is just what's displayed on the dashboard itself, but we're programmatically referencing it, no spaces allowed, with the metric name at ADV. And we could put the metric name ADV here or metric name here, whatever you want to match it to. A basic metric query, same thing. I change it to AIOps metric query, say dashboard unload. What's the maximum? Remember, I mentioned maximum for the query. What is the value we want to pull out? We want the metric name, so the metric. Here's our pattern. So this is our source name specifier, our metric. We want a regex. Here's our metric name specifier. We get it returned. We can do the regex to start clipping or modifying the returned values. In this case, because I get back to the whole metric, I'm actually going out and I'm yanking anything up to the colon is being removed, and then I'm yanking everything after the colon out as the return. It is grep format, and I can change sorting, and that's it. And then there's a little preview at the bottom. Do I allow multiple selections? Notice I didn't have that option for the advanced. Do I want to include an all options? Do I want to include a none option? So let's hop into that before we start running low on time. So very straightforward. If I want to create a dashboard from scratch, let's go back out to our little folder here. Actually, we're going to go to the main one here. Let's manage, go up here. We're going to create a new dashboard. Very simple. You have a panel, you want to create more panels, you add them here. I find it's easy to add an empty panel. Change my drop down here to either advanced query if it's an advanced query, or AIOps metrics if it's a metric query. Very straightforward. I have no data here, so I need to go out and I want to take something and put it in. So I'm simply going to cut and paste this in because my typing is terrible. But we're going to change our query to, in this case, I'll do an exact. I could do a regex. So we want to specify which agent or which source is our data coming from. And in this case, because it's synthetic, we're doing static because it's always the same. I'm going to do a regex for the actual full metric path to the metric. I click here and I get a refresh. This is a non-aggregated. You'll notice I have one for each matching metric. If I wanted to go out and aggregate it, very simply, transform. I can add fields from calculation. I can choose different things. I can choose to reduce the row, total calculation. And if I say replace all fields, Here's my replace all fields. And that's where we were in the example. Very straightforward. I'm going to turn this off. Once again, there's quite a few things here. If you'll notice, we also have the ability to add another query. So if I want to graph something else on top of it, I can turn it into a bar chart, remove the lines. There's lots of different options. I'm not going to go through them all. You can name your axes. You can add in links, uh, a link to a page, or formulate a link based upon the results. I can indicate thresholds that I have alarms on it, so it'll draw lines for thresholds. Now, we have multiple visualizations. What if I wanted this as something other than a graph? Well, I can make it a gauge, bar charts. You just change it, and then once you've done that, let's pick something interesting here. Yeah, I'll just leave it here. I can go out and I can now change the different options that are available for display, calculate all the values, the last value. Not going to go through all the options. We just don't have time, but this will get you at least started and you can start looking at the available options here. If I want to make it transparent, remove that background, make it embedded, and I can. Okay, very straightforward. You can override if you want to override units and measurements. You want to add a specific coloring threshold to the metric. That can all be done for the individual field here. Overrides can be set if you've got multiple series being graphed onto the same graph. You can actually add an override for an individual series matching criteria, and you can give it by name or regex. Okay, very similarly, if I wanted to create a new panel and I wanted to create it with the advanced query, I change this to advanced query. I can go out and give it my query. Here's my time series. Now this will display all the individual ones. You'll notice why I don't have the sum. If I wanted to summarize it very simply, I could sum it. Notice I get a null. If I add the keep, I can actually start saying I want to keep the time value just to be sure that it's always there. I now will have to keep the data value, and I will choose a name. And probably didn't pick a good name here. Or it's actually just the aggregated, because it's aggregated, the sum, the metric name is different because it's across multiple components. But if I picked an attribute like location or something that's consistent across all of the summed attributes like data time and the summed value, that would then be the value of it. So, for example, if I pick the metric path, here's an example where it all matches up. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the dashboard that we have. So if we were going to create a variable, I'm just going to quickly do that because we're running a little bit out of time here. So I want to say they're all variables. I click here, I create my variable. By the way, save your dashboard. I can enter my query. I can say I want it to be a query, a text box, ad hoc filters. I can go out and I can make it an advanced query. I can enter my query and build it from there. I'm going to hop to an example right now because it's just a little easier that's already done. And then show you a few things about those queries. So first things first, let's go to our training. Let's look at our queries. So in order to change this advanced query to use a filter, I simply replaced. So this is a basic regular AOPS metrics, but it's got an advanced query. I simply replaced my metric name with the variable. So now as I change that variable, whoops, wrong one. So now as I change the variable, I will get different values. If I had this be this variable, it would pull from there, which is the one over, which I'm going to show you in a second. So for that one, we've changed it to metric name advanced. And we'll hop back to that in a second. And here's metric name basic, and this one's controlled by this one. Now you'll notice the values are different. That is the example where Regex is sometimes a little easier for filtering. Why? You might overmatch. So if I look at the filters here, I've got my advanced filtering. So I've got more drop-down options available. And guess what? Some of these, the basic queries, may not have a value for that. This is from a NAS query, so it absolutely will always have a value in a NAS window. Simple as that. But if I go for one, let's say I'm going to probes and I pull probes from here, I would expect everything to look identically. So going to my dashboard settings, clicking on variables, here's my list, and here's my example. So I put in my advanced one, my time series, basically very similar to the query I had before. No sum, because I need the names of the metrics. I want the metric name attribute. I don't want the all option, because all those things don't graph well on the same graph, right? And here's my drop down. Notice I've got more. Why is this the case? Because for the ASM folder path mobile to mainframe, there are a lot more metrics that have that attribute. I should be using a more structured query that would give me a set similar to, and I'm going to jump back. Here's a little hot link. If I go to the basic one, I need to restrict it more so I only get the metrics that have probes, performance, good, uptime, and probes failed. Now, why do I say this is easier? Because I can find this very quickly which metrics I want. Where if I'm looking at the variables, I might have a lot of attributes that match, and I need to be much more specific in my query to restrict it down. That's why I might get something here where it's if it's an advanced metric query using an advanced filter, I change this to any of these, I always have data because there's always a matching metric. But these don't. So that's a problem. Okay. So I think I've shown you enough about that to get you started and make you a little dangerous. So next thing we're going to do very quickly is we're going to jump back here. Just want to quickly cover kind of did the creating your first dashboard already. So we want to quickly cover creating a scheduled report. Very straightforward. Let me hop on in and display the slideshow. So scheduled reports are used to send a PDF version. You just basically pick your dashboard to a specified set of email addresses or email groups. The big restrictions. Email groups must be able to receive external emails. We send this from the outside. You need to be able to send it. A lot of times we get people who are trying to send to internal email groups and they're not available for us to send to them. They're your email groups internal. They do support universe security, so you can overlay a different universe onto a dashboard automatically. If you have access to that universe, you can create a report with it. You can specify a new time range, so it can push a time range on the report before it generates the PDF. You can preview them when we're setting them up, and you can set them at a specific time every hour, every day, and every month. Very straightforward. You go to reports, you create your report, you choose the dashboard, you get a pull down list. I would suggest knowing your dashboard. It's not easy to search because there's no real way to find by folder. Know your dashboard structure because you can find it that way. Though this is the folder, then the dashboard name. If you want to enable the time range, then you can select the time range. Otherwise, you're going to get the default time range. Who's going to get it? I'm going to get the email or group. What universe that I have rights to can I include? Is there a custom message you want to have in the email before you pass the report? Do you want to have the grid layout in how things are structured? Force a layout, make sure it's clean. If there's a table, do you want a screenshot of the table or do you want the actual table data in the report? Enable multi-page is how your report looks, that you're trying to make it essentially what it says, multi-page. And then just choose your schedule every Wednesday at 16 hour, 30 minutes, which time zone. Very straightforward. You save it and you're done. To do a quick little run through this before we hop onto questions. Very simple. Go to reports, create a new report. If you have one there, you can edit it. Give it a name, choose a dashboard. I'm going to pick just a dashboard here. We'll type in, grab this dashboard, and I have access to all the universes, so I'm just going to pick enterprise, grid layout, enable the table data, and we'll preview. And now we get a generated PDF of that report. Could make it for the last week, the last day. It's essentially that dashboard in an emailed report. Very straightforward. Okay, so let's hop back in the last couple of minutes and do any questions we may have. So let me take a look. So, hi, advanced query is very useful. Are there any docs available for us to use all the functions parameters? There is. There is in tech docs, and we'll make sure that we post that probably to the. Um, I guess we'll have to find the right place to post it. I was about to say that the ASM notifications, but I think there's better places for it. But we do have documentation as part of our standard docs on support. That seems to be the only question. Um, so while we're here, just one little quick last thing, um, just as it relates to advanced queries, since we only really had one question and we have 1 minute. So if you're in DXO2, you will notice smart charts now. Most customers have this enabled. There are a few customers who don't have it enabled yet. Here is an example where you can also test out your advanced queries. So if I had an advanced query, like we had earlier in the dashboard, I can choose to put it here, and I can actually look at my graphs. And let's say I want to look at the last 24 hours. That should look very similar to what we just had in our dashboard. So you can also kind of hone your advanced queries here. And then you can cut and paste that into your dashboard. So one last little thing. Okay. And you can save it as well and go back to it. With that, I wanted to thank everyone for attending the training, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.